Good morning and welcome to this live stream. If you do join me today, I will prioritise your questions about primary maths above anything else. I think I'm live. There's something glitching this morning. It was a real struggle to get live. I'm not sure if this is going to hold this live stream. Let's see how we go. So the first video I put live last week was straight after the live stream, and that was 3D shape. Hi, I can see there's someone watching. If you have a question, please post it and I will prioritise your question. Or just say hi if you're in the mood for saying hi. And then there are 3 other videos I've posted this week, and none of them are the normal Rebecca the Maths Lady videos. The next Rebecca the Maths Lady video is on volume, and that is going live at 9:30 today after this live stream. And then I'll try to get back up to 2 a week to finish this lot by the end of this year. So I've called this video live stream other videos on my channel because, to give me a chance to talk a little bit about those other videos, as there have been 3 this week. One was a political speech, which has nothing to do with education. It's all about the chaos that's going on in local government reorganisation in Cumbria just now, in my role as a county councillor. And the other 2 relate to an ebook that I was asked to write a chapter for about pandemic experiences of educators. And if you look, you'll see there are 2 short videos there. One is about my experiences, which have been great because being locked down suits me. I'm used to earning no money, and put me in touch with lots of amazing people around the world who are suddenly available. Hi, if you want to say hi or ask a question, that'd be great. So I created a kind of yin and a yang video. My experiences of lockdown, which have been great, and teachers' experiences in primary maths in England in lockdown, which is really my native domain, and I just captured it as it is. And it's not so good. So I'll prattle on a little bit about the ways in which people talk about what you do if you leave the classroom, because I'm not generally in the classroom these days. Life after the classroom, and for me, I had to step away from the classroom because I couldn't teach in the way that I wanted to teach, and that happened in 2008. I'd been a secondary head of maths. I'd been hugely successful as a secondary head of maths. The results at my school were astonishing, and it was a school with profound issues. All the children with the most challenges went there, it seemed, and I taught in low floor, high ceiling ways, which are really highly professionally skilled, and we got amazing results with those children. But when my school closed in 2008, I looked for another job in secondary maths, and there weren't any other schools in Cumbria or that I could access where I could teach in that way. That was pretty obvious. Schools wanted to use small steps approaches, which work fine in quite a few contexts, but they leave you with awful bottom sets where you're relying on those kids getting help from their parents or getting tutors. And often the parents and the tutors don't actually know how to help the children who are struggling most. So essentially, as a teacher, you end up in a situation where you're bullying the kids because you're teaching them badly, and they are taking the blame for their failure to progress. And when you've taught in the ways that work with those classes, it's really, really obvious. So in the end, for me then in 2008, the solution for me was to become a lecturer in maths education. And I worked part-time doing that, and that allowed me to do a job that I really believed in. And it also allowed me some freedom. Like a lot of lecturers, I took part in national level consultations on policy, and I started to feed back into the system and share my experiences. The reason the kind of teaching practice that I used had disappeared was due to Ofsted and the regulator coming into schools, and the people who were regulators, the inspectors, actually not understanding the kind of teaching skills that I used, and so they tended to negatively rate them. So head teachers were desperate not to get negatively rated, so they tended to use a small steps approach, which was much more transparent to a regulator coming in. Hello, if you're there, I'd love to hear from you. Please say hi or ask a question. I'll prioritise your questions, otherwise I'll just wrap it on. And it was a real privilege to be part of that world. I was among lots of people who are respected, who had phenomenal experience in a wide variety of situations in education, and you could really talk to them. And then and I also worked at national level in maths education to try and put these skills back into the system, because everyone realised they'd disappeared by accident. It wasn't a good idea they'd disappeared. And we just had really honest and frank conversations about what was going on and how we could make it better, which was quite difficult. And then in 2010, all of that was shut down by Dominic Cummings and Michael Gove, some key politicians. The Conservatives got power and they decided to shut down consultation and demonise experts in education. And it was interesting to be inside that, to say the least, because the level of persecution and systematic attacks on people with ability, and it was clearly happening just because they could say things like, perhaps it isn't a good idea to create a competitive market in education because of, and they expected people in power to have reasoned answers. I think I'm back. Sorry about that. So we spent about a year trying to get consultation going again. We won a battle in court because the government was failing to consult, and that was illegal. And when they did consult, it was just a sham. So eventually I realised the only thing left for me to try was politics. And at that point there was a coalition government, and the Lib Dems seemed to have some influence and some say, and they seemed to be pretty sane, so I joined them. And I expected it to be awful. I had the worst possible expectations from politics, and it wasn't. It was an absolute privilege, and it has continued to be for the last 10 years. Found myself surrounded by very, very dedicated and inspirational people who've been the stars in the sky and have helped me get my bearings when I didn't have any and I didn't know how to carry on. So they quickly put me onto a national level committee, and within the coalition government we just talked about what was going. Nick Gibb all out because they were the dictators. I'd love to hear more about how small steps don't work. I love LTHC. I love LTHC. What's LTHC approaches? Oh dear, hang on. How do I get these comments up? Let's just show that live chat, all messages visible. Can lose the essence of what you're trying to teach. Low threshold, high ceiling. Okay, hang on, I can go back now. Here we go. I love low threshold, high ceiling. Yeah, I tend to call it low floor, high ceiling just because it's a bit easier. Approach in mixed stage classes, and I find the small steps stuff that's put out, too cumbersome. So the small steps approach really does work in some circumstances, and it works. It relies on you having an expert curriculum that's really well thought out by expert people in advance. That breaks everything down into tiny steps, and you teach each step really thoroughly, and when the children have got it, you move on. Now that has the potential to work if you implement it really thoroughly. If you have single year teaching, obviously if you have mixed year teaching, it's just nonsense. And if your community of children is extremely stable, so they're all regularly attending, and you've got no children moving between schools, and you can teach them all together. So in those contexts, it can work, and it can be a really good solution for a school if your teachers have a very low skill level, because it doesn't require them to have a high skill level. You can implement it from outside. So that's the benefit of the small steps approach. And there are circumstances in which I, as a leader in maths education, would choose to use it. But it's not the most effective way to teach maths. That's definitely a low floor, high ceiling approach. It's just more powerful because it relies on a deeper understanding of structure. And when you teach that deeper understanding of structure, and you're really communicating with and listening to your children as you can when you're empowered as a teacher, and the Small Steps curriculum disempowers you as a teacher because you're following the curriculum rather than observing the children and thinking for yourself. The low floor, high ceiling strategy is a better way to teach, provided you have teachers who are skilled to use it. So they need the training and they need the support. Otherwise, unless if your circumstances are fairly stable, single year teaching, and a stable cohort of children who are always attending, then there are different circumstances in which different ones are best. And one of the biggest problems that we've had that's made Small Steps a better approach is that all the national training has been on it for the last 7 years. There's been no training on the low floor, high ceiling, structurally led approach at all, apart from what I've been offering. And it's even outlawed to the extent that Maths Hubs are not allowed to share information about what I do in their emails to schools. They are configured to roll out the government message, which is Small Steps approach. So low floor, high ceiling, it's like a virtuous circle. Once you trust your teachers, this is why I love early years and planning in the moment. Yeah, early years is one of the places that most teachers are empowered to, and not dominated by a requirement for a Small Steps approach. But have you seen the new early years guidance that requires rote learning? Guess who wrote that? Statutory from next year. Yeah. And of course, we haven't even implemented the godforsaken multiplications tables check yet, where instead of spending his budget for assessing impact, he spent his budget for assessing impact on analysing the impact to ensure that the multiplication tables check forced rote learning into schools. Yeah. So I was saying that life beyond the classroom and trying to change the system, it used to come from working as a lecturer in education, and that world ended in 2010, and then the only way was politics. And I expected it to be horrific, and it has been a huge privilege. We did make massive progress during the coalition government, and then all that was completely wiped out in 2015. But at least we had a fairly sane Prime Minister who kept the nutters at bay. And unfortunately, they're back with a vengeance. And they've got a vast majority and a mandate to run amok, doing whatever they want for the next 4 years. Still more than 4 years, isn't it? But at least I have the freedom as a politician to speak out on these things, and I do. If you go to my channel and then you scroll down to the Politics in Cumbria page, you'll see how much I enjoy speaking out. My one about Dominic Cummings in maths education from January, how cathartic it is to actually talk about it. And I live in a world where people do talk about the fact that it's nonsense that we've had an imposed free market culture in education, and how desperately we needed and still need local resourced organisation this winter to cope with, in particular with the pandemic. And we talk about the nonsense of extreme high pressure assessment and how we actually need criteria-based assessment, and the way that all assessment is falling apart this winter because it's normative. So it's all about having a national competition to see which school does the best, to put as much stress as possible on everyone by never having criteria by which everyone can succeed. An assessment, of course, should be criteria-based. We should be assessing children to see whether they can do specific things and accrediting them if they can. And if that was what was going on, it would be much easier to adapt the assessment to work in challenging circumstances. We can simply say, oh, well, these children did this a bit later because of the pandemic. Just put off the assessment. Or we can find other ways of assessing it because it's really objective about what's going on and what we're assessing and what we're accrediting, instead of it all being this massive national boiling pot of competition to ensure there are lots of failing schools to put more pressure on them. In other words, to identify the schools with more challenges. Anyway, back to low floor, high ceiling. So I did it all the way. It's a virtuous circle, because the more you do it, the more upskilled the teachers become, and because they're always being observational, so they become better at being observational, and the quality of the teaching improves because they're tailoring it to the class and the needs of the children in front of them, which a small steps pre-written curriculum can never do. So that's some of the reasons why it's better, and that it's a lot of the ways of teaching maths, the deep structures have popped out of that observational teaching when you're listening to child after child after child after child telling you how they see the world. Suddenly you see a deeper structure. So where I've got all these schools in Cumbria that have been using this, they tell me a lot of the stuff that I'm trying to teach them. I run the training in a way that listens before it teaches, and I can get through how to teach a whole year in a 2-hour session simply because I listen to see which bits of it teachers have already got and already deeply understand, and then just drill into the bits that are a bit shaky. Teach them that really thoroughly to share the knowledge from other schools. What else? I think that's about it really. So if there's no more questions, I'm going to go out for a bike ride today. Definitely a day to get some fresh air. It's just looking a little bit brighter than it has the last couple of days, which isn't hard. Okay, so thank you ever so much for watching and for joining me, and have a good day, and I will get on creating my happy Sunday windy walk in Northumberland for me. Well, I love Northumberland. I was just telling my 12-year-old daughter, when I was 12 I did a sponsored walk. I grew up in Newcastle and I walked to Lindisfarne in 4 days, sleeping on church hall floors and in the centre at sea houses, and it was life-changing. Gave me so much more confidence and a total love of the Northumberland coast. And I'm a real Northumbrian, having grown up in Newcastle and loved Northumberland and lived most of my adult life in Cumbria. So yeah, get out up into George Bay. Bit of skinny dipping in George Bay is a good thing, even in winter. All right. Okay, I'm going to say bye for now. Take care. Bye.